interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and start this session. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. A very good evening to everyone. Welcome to our session on an incredible important topic, women bridging the clean energy finance gap. As we gather here today, it's evident that the transition to clean energy is not just an environmental imperative, but also a socio-economic opportunity. However, this transition demands significant investment, and unfortunately, there exists a gap in financing, hindering progress. What's even more concerning is the gender disparity within this gap. Today, we come together to explore strategies, initiatives, and innovative approaches led by women to bridge this gap. We'll delve into the barriers faced, the opportunities at hand, and the most importantly, the pathways to empower women as key agents of change in the clean energy sector. So let's embark on this journey together to not only address the financing challenges, but also to harness the full potential of women in driving the clean energy transition forward. Let me start with calling upon Monali Zia Hazara to deliver the welcome address. Monali works as a regional and clean energy specialist at USAID India. With over 25 years of experience, Monali has managed several clean energy projects on the regional energy connectivity, renewable energy integration, renewables, distribution reforms, etc. Prior to joining USAID, Monali managed the Industry and Environment Unit of Center for Science and Environment. Welcome, Monali.
Thank you so much, Farah, and good evening, everyone. On behalf of USAID, it's my pleasure to welcome you all for this spotlight session on women bridging the clean energy financing gap. This session is co-organized by USAID SAREP, or South Asia Regional Energy Partnership Program, along with SAVI, which stands for South Asia Women in Energy. In USAID, we love acronyms, so bear with us, which happens to be a joint initiative of USAID and USISPF. A key focus of USAID is to advance gender and social equity through strategic investments and initiative, and that is demonstrated by the fact that USAID increased in gender equality investments to 2.6 billion in FY financial year 2023. These investments are aimed at empowering women and girls globally, fostering economic security, bridging the digital divide, promoting sustainability in critical economic sectors, and so on. As we are all aware, those present here, that despite global progress on women's rights and equality, women continue to be underrepresented in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, representing only slightly more than 35% of the world's STEM graduate. In the energy sector, the stats are even more concerning. As per the International Renewable Energy Agency, the women account for just 22% of the entire workforce, and many of them holding administrative positions. At USAID, we believe that gender equality and women empowerment are not just part of development, but are the core of development. With the clean energy transition happening in many countries, we must ensure that women are part of these transition and solution. We need to harness women's potential as leader and active agents of change in this transition towards clean energy. Through collaborative efforts and shared experiences, we can break down barriers and create pathways for women to excel in all facets of the industry. One such collaborative effort, which I would like to highlight, is the SAVI platform, which again, I will say the full form one more time, South Asia Women in Energy, which USAID has established jointly with US-India Strategic Partnership Forum. The idea behind this platform is to promote women's leadership in the energy sector and mainstream their participation in this field, which is traditionally very male-dominated. Now, SAVI is a testament to our commitment, USAID's commitment to empowering women to serve as agents of change, not just in leadership position, but across the board. Together with USISPF, USAID has taken a multifaceted approach to bridge gender gaps in the energy sector, focused on outreach and recruitment, mentorship and leadership, networking, and professional development. Ripu here will cover, give you more details about the SAVI program and will be while he sets the context. I'll also quickly like to highlight some of the work which we are doing on generally doing on finance mobilization through the SAREP program, where we are, implementing numerous interventions on bridging the financing gap or in the whole clean energy transition process. These include, developing innovative financing mechanisms like green bond frameworks, supporting corporates and public sector units like Indian Railway to develop a comprehensive financial strategy to meet their net zero target, engaging key financial institutions like Power Finance Corporation in India on developing their ESG framework, and developing solar and hydropower assessment toolkits for Nepal financial institution like HIDCL, as well as hosting investment summit. SAREP has also designed innovative debt and equity fund. For example, it has facilitated mobilization of USD 6 million through an e-mobility investment fund. In addition, SAREP has now developed, is in the process of developing an investment mobilization platform in which JSAI has been integrated by giving gender matrix assured weightage in the selection criteria. With these interventions, SAREP mobilized around 3 billion for clean energy in FY 2023. Now, today's session brings both these themes together, financing as well as gender integration, and focuses on the role of women, what the role of women can play to bridge the clean energy financing gap. It also aligns very well with the theme of ASEF closing plenary tomorrow, providing a just and inclusive clean energy transition for all. We have seen that women-led energy ventures often face significant barriers, especially when it comes to accessing finance. Traditional financial institutions may perceive these ventures as high risk. While this panel will discuss these challenges, but more importantly, we hope to explore solutions and opportunities to bridge this financing gap. We hope that the discussion will leave the audience with some success story and best practices in tackling the financial gap at the intersection of gender and social equity. Through SAVI, we hope to keep the dialogue ongoing and enable a supportive regional ecosystem that facilitates networking between women entrepreneurs, investors, and mentors. We also hope that we can together push the gender and social equity agenda in the sector and collaborate more in the region to scale up this often ignored agenda. I'd like to thank all our distinguished panelists and speakers, are very beautiful and pretty, including the men too, men who will bring in gender diversity on the panel. And I'd also like to thank all the participants who are present here. Frankly, I mean, this being organized in a side room, we were a little skeptical, but glad to see so many people here. And by coming together, sharing thoughts and advocating for a change, I'm sure we'll drive a clean energy transition and ensure it's just and inclusive for all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Monali. I think I forgot to introduce myself. Sorry about that. I'm Farah Ahmed. I'm the cross-cutting lead for the SAREF program, and I'm going to be the facilitator for this session. It is my absolute great honor to also introduce the keynote speaker, and I'm fortunately very happy to do that. Dr. Leena Srivastav, who's the keynote speaker for our session, has 4 decades of experience in the sector. She's here with us today, and it gives me immense pleasure to call her upon the stage. Dr. Leena's worked in the past with TERI, the India's largest energy research institute, and the climate change for over 3 decades, with the last position being of the executive director in TERI. In 2013, she moved to the School of Advanced Studies as its vice chancellor for nearly 7 years. She retired from the full-time engagements as a deputy director general for science of the International Institute of Applied System Analysis in Vienna, Austria, where she served from November 2019 to July 2022. Ma'am, can we have you?
Thank you very much, Farah. It's a great pleasure to be here. I was just waiting for my presentation to come up, and since you all have been so kind as to give me a full 7 minutes to speak, I'm going to put my timer on. I'll try not to go over time. Right. So once again, thank you very much to all the organizers for having me here. And in addition to it being an incredible topic on which we are going to be speaking, I think we have an incredible set of panelists who are working in this sector. And as I was thinking about what I can share today, I thought I should probably focus on the context in which we'll be discussing this particular topic, which has multiple dimensions to it, and possibly reflect a little bit on my own confusion and maybe pose a few questions, challenges to the panelists that you may want to take forward with you. So first of all, I mean, when I was looking at the topic, it came to mind that when we are talking about women in the context of financing, of the financing gap, really, we are speaking about the role of women both directly and indirectly in the clean energy sector. This is just a reminder. Everybody here is familiar with that. One is, of course, that women are part of the supply chain of clean energy from start to finish. And in the form of being either decision makers or influencers, if not decision makers, employees and entrepreneurs. So we are talking about all the roles, I presume. But we also are speaking about women as consumers, a very big area where, as housewives in particular, and particularly in rural areas, there are some very difficult choices that they are faced with, that they have to make, and which need to be empowered in case we want to move them to the clean energy access. Indirectly, of course, we have to increase the base of the number of women that are available to us to be able to play the role that we spoke about, which is critically important. So how do you do that? And that goes back to the issue of education, goes back to the issue of the fact that when we talk about SDGs, written in the text of Agenda 21 is the fact that we should look at all these SDGs as integrated, indivisible, but in reality, we never do so. So how do we do that? And how do we keep that in mind? So I wanted to highlight education over here, and we'll come back to that point in a little bit. And of course, influencing the overall social context in which women can play the role that they are actually very well positioned to do if we allow them to do so. The question also came to mind, and I'm just reflecting upon this for this session, on where is it that we are setting our ambition. So when we talk about women bridging the energy financing, clean energy financing gap, we are looking at women both as drivers, as I mentioned in the earlier slide, as well as actors, so critically important actors, right? So bridging the financing gap to get access, we have a lot of many examples for many years about these self-help groups that have done a lot. One of the mechanisms, not the only one, but always scale has been a problem, and there are other developments that take place that tend to derail these, but I will not get into that. Women leaders in the finance sector, I think we'll have several people here talking about that who can provide gender sensitive policies and mechanisms. I have said rather limiting in terms of impact and societal transformation, but I would like to hear your views on whether this statement is correct or not. Then we have women leaders in the clean energy space, which could be in industry, clean energy industry, or it could be in governments, which is critically important. And we tend to have possibly more female representation in governments than we do in industry in leadership position, because governments have been open to this concept much more than industry has. So what are the gender sensitive approaches? As actors, of course, the role of finance policies, strategies to empower women, and of course, using levers of finance to drive the clean energy transition. In here, I also had the question, which I did not put on the slide, but it is still there in my mind, that again, going back to the synergies that I spoke about earlier across SDGs, in terms of our ambition, is it clean energy or is it women's empowerment? And if we bring the two together, as we are in this session, which is correct, are we narrowing the base too much And will we be looking at the least common denominator approach? Just placing it out there to be contested. So of the roles that we spoke about, I wanted to start with entrepreneurship, but I wanted to take a step back and not talk about the challenges of women in entrepreneurship, but entrepreneurship in the clean energy space that we are talking about. And there was a very interesting study that was done, which is at the bottom of the screen, listed over here, uh, supported by a foundation called Lemelson, who have been working a lot with entrepreneurs. And this particular study, again, because of time, I'm just going to quickly run over. They looked at invention-based enterprises and service companies. I think this is critically important for women, service companies and the role that service companies can play. And they also analyzed, based on case studies in Africa and Asia and India in particular, the pathways for achieving scale and impact. Today, we are talking about ambition. We need to move very quickly to clean energy solutions, but we also need to take that advantage for empowering women and allowing them to grow. So that ambition has to be there. So scale and impact, how is this working currently? So I won't get into the challenges or the recommendations, but just flash 2 or 3 slides for you to take a look at. One is that broadly, on the basis of 230 entrepreneurship founders that these people interviewed, they found, this is critically important, 62% have a master's degree or PhD, successful ones, huh? And 70% have a degree in STEM. Prior experience in large energy companies, critically important. And I want you to just, as I'm speaking about these, put this yourself in your mind in the context of what it is that we want to achieve in terms of women's empowerment, particularly in rural areas and underdeveloped areas and so on. So, but only 5% of these had actually previously founded a company. So these are the patterns that they found. And my question is, are the odds stacked against women entrepreneurs? If you look at this as a general experience with men who have got into the entrepreneurship space. And this is just a snapshot. The invention-based enterprises or innovation-based enterprises and service companies, the IBEs obviously take a lot more time to be able to stabilize, mature, a lot more investment, a lot more commitment than the service companies that we are looking at. And does this offer a way forward for us when we are looking at women-based entrepreneurship initiatives on where we would like to focus? So there is a time dimension that we have over here. Under 10 years old, the success that you have of IBEs is significantly lower than that you have for service-based companies. With maturity, of course, things change, and that's something for us to consider. Similarly, over here, we are looking at the founding teams of the top 20% of companies of the ones that were surveyed. And you see that the top 20% had a significantly, the founders had a significantly larger experience in the global top 1,000 firms. So there is a network, there is that experience that they are bringing to the enterprises that they have put in place. A lot of them have financing and accounting experience, and typically we find that this is not available. So we focus on STEM, which does not include some of these. And then, of course, STEM or product design is much more important for the IBEs than it is for the service companies. So again, depending on some of this data that is available to us, it might inform our thought process in terms of where is it that we might want to focus. I'm out of time, Ripu, so just give me 30 seconds more and I'll wrap up. So type 2 companies are the ones where women are involved or entrepreneurs are involved in looking at those companies that are servicing appliances, clean cook stoves, electric vehicles, and so on and so forth. And there the atmosphere, the environment is much more challenging than what you might have on the generation side. So once again, it's a choice that needs to be made. Here, I'm just going to use the same IRENA study that you referred to, I think, Farah. The statistics are there, the graphs are there. I'm sure everybody has seen this. some of the biggest barriers to women's participation in deploying renewables for energy access, now we are not talking about the total, is the cultural and social norms, right? But to me, in all the interventions that we have, we are really not addressing this. We are addressing this, we are addressing this, the whole lot. But the one which is at the very top is something that we possibly leave to somebody else to deal with, but don't bring it together. And that also becomes a little bit of a challenge. It's there implicitly, but it's not there explicitly, and we are not able to provide the evidence that addressing all of this is also going to address this. I have no doubt that it will address this, but we are not able to do so very clearly. And in the identification of barriers, very often we confuse or present together the barriers to entry into a business and the barriers to growth. So when we talk about ambition, entry is not enough. You need to have growth. You need to have the scale that we are talking about. So how are we going to address that? And the financing, can it be only for entry, or how do you support growth? So I'm just going to leave that there. Level of education skills, this is a chart that many of you are familiar with, and each one of these over here. But once again, I do believe that there are certain challenges which are wider society related and certain which are work related. And the reason why I'm mentioning this, as I've mentioned, possibly it will come in the next slide, is that if we put everything on work related barriers, will we be creating a pushback for gender inclusion in employment opportunities? This is just to say that we don't have to really worry about the fact that there are not too many STEM jobs which are there, because going back to the earlier entrepreneurship slide that we have, and in terms of roles that women can play, I think there are roles that can be created in each one of these. But we really have to see how to optimize that. And this is where I was saying that the slide again is from the IRENA report, but my questions are we creating a perception of lifetime challenges in hiring women through their entire career, that corporates or industry has to look after women and give them a preferential treatment? Should we really be looking at multi-track career progression paths, given that there are these various STEM, non-STEM, and other kind of disciplines from which people, legal could be one, where women can become an integral part? And how do you define this career progression? It's not just entry. That's a limited point that I'm making. It is career progression, even in employment when we are looking at it. And of course, capacity building programs have to be better tailored. Finally, I'll just stop here. So the essence of what I'm really saying is that gender equity is fine. We should head to gender equality and keep that in our own minds and set a time frame for that. When, till when are we going to be holding on to crutches? I mean, we have a very long way to go. Don't get me wrong. I completely agree with that. But we need to have a goal. We need to have a vision for how we are going to get to that position. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leena, for those invaluable insights into the critical role of, that women play in bridging this financing gap. And I think it was really interesting to hear what, some of the important components that you highlighted, such as social norms that actually are not really getting addressed. And then, bundling it up with certain measures that need to be taken. So thank you so much. I'd like to call upon, to move on at the interest of time, Ripu, who is a strategy consultant for the US-India Strategic Partnership, USAISPF. He's a seasoned development sector leader with 15 plus years of international interdisciplinary experience in advancing India's journey towards energy transition and climate action. Ripu.
Thank you, Farah. Thank you, Leena, for those insightful comments. Thank you, everyone, to be here. It's great to see the room, not even half full. I think it's more than half full. So it's an encouragement for this session for sure. Well, I do want to start with an unconventional approach, because we are challenging the traditional and the conventional things. And I do wanted to spend a minute on to see that, to just question that why are we here today? Why do we need to have this session? And why do we gather here today? So I do want to have a couple of prompts here that think of a successful leader in any industry. It has to be no energy or anything. Probably 2 seconds. And raise your hand if that leader is a woman. It's 5. Explains the reason why we are here. That's 1. Final prompt. Anything different did we notice at this ASAF 2024 this time? Apart from the healthy receptions and all in the evening. Anyone, anything different? Monali? Well, yeah, we had a technical session on the frameworks of renewable energy trading that was all women. I think that's the first point that I want to make, that we need to move away from these women empowerment discussions, right? Point is to have, there is enough role models already existing. Probably the point is just to bring them out in open and celebrate them as part of the whatever technical or engineering sessions. And precisely the reason why we did not name it as a gender session, it's celebrating women in the clean energy financing gap who are bridging these gaps. And we'll hear from many of those women who are the role models in that space. That's the first point. I mean, as part of the context setting, I wanted to make that very clear. Second, in terms of the numbers, how do we see ASAF 2024, where we are sitting right now? I just looked at the speakers list just before the session. I was just running some numbers. We have 379 speakers on the website. 134 women, that's 35%. It still, I think, is much better than what we have had before. But I don't know anyone looked at the number, that's 35%, 134 out of 379, just the speakers, 245 males, right? And I'll go back to what Lena questioned about the cultural and social norms there, right? There was a study again, Lena, I saw that. What does a scientist look like? And again, unconventional, not energy, not industrial, questions the cultural and social norms there. What does a scientist look like? When the Draw a Scientist study, that was a DAST famous study, was first conducted 50 years ago with elementary school students in the US and the Canada. We're not talking about developing world right now, developed world. 28 out of 5,000 students, that's 0.06%, drew a female scientist. So reflective of the times again, you might say that. When it was repeated with a similar cohort in 2018, it was still 24%. Right? So that's the larger question that I think we need to answer. Well, the results pointed out that it just enriched restrictive gender roles, probably stereotypes still exist. How vital is it to raise the visibility of female role models for girls and women, right? And particularly those succeeding in fields long dominated by men. Role models matter, and particularly for women, more so. And research did show that role models have an amplified benefit for women due to the gender biases, institutional barriers, and negative stereotypes. In short, seeing is believing, right? And it's hard to be what you cannot see, right? That's probably the why of South Asia Women in Energy. That's the context that I wanted to make. So we founded South Asia Women in Energy, particularly to celebrate the importance of having women, and also women who have achieved so much in their lifetime, and celebrate that, because we have less than 1 in 5 leadership roles in the energy sector which are held by women, right? And it's an initiative jointly owned by USAID and USISPF. It aims to increase the representation of women right at the leadership levels. And how we do that? We are organized into a 4 working group model. Each is anchored by a women leader. So those working models are mentorship, leadership, entrepreneurship, Lena, to your point, and networking. Because I think we need to provide those platforms where you're just not talking, but you have mentors and leaders available to help you with that second leap of career with the available networks. That's one. Second is diversity versus inclusion. We keep using these words very, very interchangeably, but I think I wanted to make that point that diversity is in the workplace refers to the variation in personal and social characteristics. But inclusion is whether you are giving a seat on the table for women. And that's what Savi really does in all their panels. Last but not the least, I think this is what we call the clean energy financing gap for women, because I think I'll step back. Imagine a brilliant woman with a groundbreaking clean energy solution, but when it seeks the fund, she seeks the funding, she faces those roadblocks, right? And traditional financial institutions might perceive women-led ventures as higher risk. And we have Ragini from Caspian Debt to talk about it more. Traditional limiting their access to the capital needed to launch or scale their businesses. And this is really what we call it as a clean energy financing gap for women. And today's session for us is all about bridging that gap. And we really want to hear personal experiences, what hasn't worked, more importantly, from all your experiences. And see, can we assemble here and look at some of those networks? And I think the call to action from our side, or let's say concrete steps we're expecting, is towards creating an inclusive and supportive ecosystem for women in clean energy. I'm pretty sure Kavita will talk about the ecosystem enabling thing that she's brings to the table. And I think each of us has a role to play to this in advocating, and by doing so, we can unlock the full potential. With that, I'll stop and hand it over for the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Ripu. I think it was really exciting to hear the numbers that came forward, and a big realization for us. I think in the interest of time, and I know we're running a bit late, but I'd like to introduce our panel, which is quite a dynamic panel, but I'll be very brief because I think how much ever I say is going to be less to describe their experiences. So I'll be really quick. I'd like to first mention about Anika. She is the Principal Energy Specialist at the Asian Development Bank. And she co-leads a bank-wide initiative to enable the development of resilient, responsible, and sustainable clean energy technology, supply chain in developing Asia and the Pacific. Please come on board, ma'am. I'd like to call upon Laurie Navarro, who has more than 40 years of experience in the clean energy leadership, program management, and relationship building with the private and public sector partners and stakeholders. Can we have you on board? Sunita Dubey, who's the country representative for Vietnam for the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet. She has over 25 years of combined experience in the energy sector in South Asia, Southeast Asia, and Africa. I'd like to invite Ragini Bajaj. She's the Senior Advisor for Caspian Debt, is a development finance professional with more than 20 years of experience in microfinance, impact investment, and mainstreaming gender in financing. Welcome on board. I'd like to invite our one and only male panelist, Vishal Thapa. He brings 25 years of global experience working with a wide range of public-private sector partners across energy, climate, energy efficiency, environment, and sustainability. Welcome on board. Kavita Gandhi, who is the Executive Director for Sustainable Energy Association of Singapore. She has an extensive background in environment and development sector spanning over 20 years. Kavita has been involved in multi-dimensional projects like the United States Asia Environment Partnership, and was instrumental in setting up the Clean Technology Environment Management Center. Welcome on board. And now I'd like to call upon our moderator, who is Nidhi. Nidhi Prabha is the Jesse Advisor for the USAID SARIP program. She holds a PhD in gendering urban public transport systems in India. Welcome.
A very, very good evening to all of you. I'm very, very pleased and honored to be moderating this session. And I'm so glad to see all of you here despite being the last session. and I don't need to talk about any data points or do anything about, context setting, because our lovely colleagues have already done that for me and made my job easy. So I'm just going to dive into, learning from our panelists here today. And therefore, I would like to, quickly jump to Laurie, you first, on, given that, you have such a vast experience of over 4 decades in climate finance, what are perhaps, some of the biggest challenges that you've seen in your career span on what, women clean energy ventures have faced in raising more or raising capital for their ventures. So I would like to, over to you to kind of set the context with the challenges first. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Nidhi, for the set of questions. Let me share that in an activity that my team implemented for the European Union funded program, the Access to Sustainable Energy Program, my team and I did a component called Productive Use of Renewable Energy, or PURE. This is an acronym that we coined together with my late former boss, team leader, and mentor, Dr. Ernie Terrado. I will share with you key points that we learned from one of the PURE projects that we implemented, which is even before we were faced with the barrier of finding the appropriate funding for the women venture, we were faced with the concern of how to introduce an alternative technology to improve the efficiency of the operation of the women venture. So the project site is in a remote off-grid upland community in the province of Davao Occidental, found in southeastern Mindanao. In that particular community, there is a women-led venture. About 30% of the key positions in the association were actually taken by women. And the main source of livelihood or income by the households is producing fibers, abaca fibers, from abaca pulp. And the process that they have been using for decades is the manual process, which you can already expect to be very inefficient in terms of yield of the fiber compared to the input of the abaca pulp per unit time. And the quality was poor. So when we decided to help that community, the first thing that we had to address was, how do we find an alternative technology that is more efficient than the current system that they're using? So we coordinated with our Department of Agriculture and asked if they have an alternative technology that will serve the purpose. And they did. The machine is called a decorticating machine. However, for off-grid communities, the machine is diesel powered, which won't qualify under our program because we wanted to use renewable energy. So what I did was I got in touch with the fabricator of that decorticating machine and with the technical guy in my team. They designed a solar PV powered decorticating machine. That should have been the output of our technical assistance, but my team and I wanted to push the boundary. We said that if we end up with a feasibility study, so what's next? It will just gather dust in the cabinets. So I got in touch with my network of funders, and luckily I found Team Energy Foundation Incorporated. So this TEFI provided grant funds for the procurement of RE-related equipment, and that would mean the solar PV system, plus the decorticating machine, plus a small amount of money to buy materials to construct the shed where the decorticating equipment will be housed. And then the local community paid for the cost of labor or provided the labor required plus the land to build the shed. Okay, now the fabricator of the decorticating machine provided the training appropriate for the right use to the local people. So with that, we were able to put together a solar powered decorticating machine, the efficiency of which was 8 times more than the manual process. And the quality was so good that the fiber could be sold at a very attractive price to the benefit of the association. And of course, with the greater revenue and net income, the households benefited from the project. So that's the experience.
Thank you, Laurie. I think you not only spoke and contextualized, from your own regional experiences, but also, how innovative you have to become when you contextualize the debate or when you try to get interventions. You have to have that lens of keeping tailored approaches. So I think that was an excellent example of kind of being innovative, having that kind of contextualization and that lens to tailor solutions according to the context. So thank you for that insight. Now I'd like to also move to Annika here, who I would like to, you to kind of talk about what has been your experience in terms of incorporating the gender lens at developmental organizations in the realm of finance. So just in terms of initiatives, or how do we kind of look at incorporating that when it comes to the developmental side of financing? Yes.
Thank you, Nidhi, and thank you very much for inviting me to this panel. So maybe I take the example of the current work I'm co-leading, where we are looking into an approach on expanding ADB's reach towards the development of critical mineral supply chains. And when you look into mining and mining supply chains, women face very similar challenges, both in the leadership in mining corporation, in small and artisanal mining, as well as the impact of mining on the community. And so in leadership, similar to energy corporations, the share of women in all levels of management is very low. They lack also mentors, and there's a level of discrimination. And while corporations are getting more aware that they need to do something to address the barriers and break the male-dominated culture in the corporations, it's very slow. So when ADB is working with these firms in our private sector, we normally, when we provide corporate loans, we do specific conditions, and we provide technical assistance so that firms are providing set targets on leadership programs and set programs for special training for women. Then on the impact of mining, often it's impacting women in the rural communities. Mining is a water-intensive activity, and women are still in remote corners, the ones who look for the water. So there are specific approaches which have been proven very effective in Latin America. The Inter-American Development Bank and the IFC have been very active in this area, which is called a landscaping area, where from the outside we involve they involve the local communities. They engage with the communities, but they also collect the data, and they have integrated strategies and create job opportunities for women. So there actually development banks can add a lot of value in their financing programs to support that women not only are adversely impacted, but also create job opportunities. I think I could talk much longer, but the red light is blinking, so I stop here.
We'll try to kind of circle back, because I think, but what you did was also to talk about a talk from an ecosystem perspective, because you brought in, and not, and it's important to highlight this because sectors such as mining is even I mean has more glaring gender gaps, while energy itself has huge gender gaps, and that we have all heard about today. But from segueing from that, what you mentioned about the ecosystem and looking at the entire gamut of things, I think I'll move to Ragini now, because she has been working at the intersection of energy and gender while in the impact investment domain. So a lot to learn from you, Ragini. So over to you.
I completely agree on the ecosystem approach. So just to give you the context, I've been part of the startup ecosystem in India. I work for a debt fund, and we've been in this business for last 10 years. And as an institution, we are committed to having a gender lens, and we've done it very intentionally, and from our experience, what I believe is that if institution needs to achieve something, it has to demonstrate that within itself. So if we want to reach out to more women, then we ought to have more women at different positions, like 45% of our total staff is women. Even our sourcing, when we go out, look for companies, 58% of our sourcing staff is also women. And, so in all senior leadership and everything, because client facing, they ought to. And that doesn't happen automatically. You need to be very intentional about it. And similar and intentional in your HR policies, and I can go on and on about it, on inclusion and bringing women back to work after their maternity leave and etc. That is one part as an institution. But also when you are sourcing those companies, you have to be very intentional on, you can't wait for women entrepreneurs to come to you. You have to be find them where you're most likely to be, where they're most likely to be. So you work with special programs of women entrepreneurs. So there's a lot of thought that goes into it, And then even in your due diligence process, are you, having that questions on, do you ask for gender desegregated data? Do you look at their policies from a gender lens? And then after that also, on your documentation, are you asking your husband to give a guarantee or a father to give a guarantee? Are you so it has to be intentional on all those parts. So having that intentional approach, what we found was that we got, we've always, like in last 3 years that we've been tracking, 30% of our disbursement have gone to women led companies, women impact businesses, and we closely track that. But again, when we looked at the sectoral divide, what we found was that if 30 companies had, a workforce about 25% women, only 2 of them belong to clean tech. If 30 companies were women led, only 5 of them came from clean tech. If 64 companies met some gender criteria, only 5 of them came from clean tech. So that's where an institution alone can do only little. There has to be a whole ecosystem approach. And, I can talk about the roles that we've been play, and some of the questions you raised on STEM, social norms, and all that. I can talk about it from an investment perspective, but I can do that in this, when the round comes. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Ragini. I think it is also important, and what struck me was that while we do talk about mentorship and individual role models, we need to have institutional role models. So I think, yes, a lot of whatever efforts that we make into this, it needs to, and I keep reiterating it in all platforms that I go to, that gender needs to be, or gender equity and social equity needs to be looked at as a perspective and not just as a variable or just as a checklist. So I think what some of the things that you said, Ragini, it is about that. It is about looking at it from an ecosystem perspective, but also be mindful of the social and cultural norms that Dr. Leena rightly pointed out in the keynote. So I would like to move now to Sunita. And Sunita has had a lot of experience in Asia and Africa. She's been in Vietnam for 4 years now, so a lot of contextual diversity, and from your experiences, if you would like to speak. So I would like to ask you about some of these various differences that you've seen across, and what are the similarities perhaps that you'd seen across these diverse contexts, but also coming and speaking from your perspectives about networks, and what are some of the efforts that perhaps GAP is doing about that. Sure, please. Oh, yes.
So, no, thank you again. Thank you for the opportunity, and also this is a really, really important topic, and it's also a topic that is really close to my heart. So, and again, I'm not a gender specialist, so just want to make that. Again, I would like to say that I will counter kind of like really Dr. Srivastava on when it comes to Vietnam. We have more women in the business who are CEOs, but we have very less in the government. So they have been able to break the business kind of like really the glass ceiling, but not the political and the government glass ceiling. So it's kind of an outlier in that sense. And one of the things that we find when we talk about gender is the relevance of data. We always say that, we are not represented, but when you visually present it, and I think this is a slide that we have developed with our partner IFC, it really hits you. And I think that's what we are also trying, is to collect more data to make our point. You haven't started the watch, because then I'm going to take an hour. And also, I think when we look at some of the impacts when you have female-led businesses, and I'm talking about C-suite, you are really seeing the kind of difference that you make on the climate. And this is very much related to climate finance, climate strategies, climate impact, and how they change their companies within, but also how they impact in terms of when they kind of like really disperse loans and make decisions for outside. And I think this is a number that is really, really important when we show it. It's, it doesn't only make climate sense, but it also makes economic sense. And when you look at that, since this is about like the finance, you look how much finance is actually gender tagged. And you see it's very little which is gender tagged. And, most of it is like, it goes, because if you don't make it, if you don't tag it to gender, it is never going to reach. And even when you tag it to gender, it doesn't mean that it's going to reach. And I think that's a very important slide for us to kind of like really refer to. So what are we doing in Vietnam? Vietnam is going to go through energy transition journey, and we started something called the Climate Leaders Network in Vietnam to ensure that the gender voices are heard, where the decisions are made. And this journey is only not led by like, the males or the leaders. So this is a network of C-suite. We felt that at middle level, the representation is fine, but at the C-suite, which makes the decision-making as part, like it's embedded in the network itself. It's co-led by GAP, USAID, IFC, and DFAT, Australian Aid. And we have like a charter, and we have quarterly meetings. We had a formal launch in March, in April this year. And it's some of the things that are coming out of this network, for example, is like our members, USAID and Standard Chartered Bank, signing an MOU to say that we are going to work together on solar in industrial park. And these are two network people coming together and doing actual work. We have another network member who has a green hydrogen company. And to your point, it is really difficult for her to raise financing, number one, because she's at the cutting edge of this technology of green hydrogen. And wherever she goes, it's very difficult for people to believe that she can actually run a successful business. So again, the network members have come, like for example, Standard Chartered Bank, GAP is also supporting her on the RE and the battery storage side. So it's kind of a hand-holding. We will support each other kind of a network as well. And lastly, we make it fun. We have color coding, we dress up, we show up, and whenever we meet, we work, but it's so much fun. And I think that keeps us kind of looking forward to our quarterly meetings. And I think the most amount of time we invest is what is going to be the next color code. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sunita. I think initiatives such as the Climate Leaders Network is very, very important and critical, because as you said, it's important to have these networks, but it's also important to have, sometimes what I have and learned from interacting with so many leaders is that it's not only about mentorship in your work life, it's also about your personal life, because as women, most likely you at whatever I would say stage of leadership you may be, you are, unfortunately, there are roles in the mode of reproduction, as we call it, or the work-home life balance. And therefore, sometimes, mentorship and such spaces are important, not only for professional mentorship, but also to kind of just talk to each other, share experiences in which you actually start feeling like, okay, so somebody understands. And it's also important to therefore also yes, it's important to have that conversation among women, but it's also important to start opening these networks to a lot of males and male leaders as well, because I think and that's one of the things that we keep talking about at the Vision for Savi, because when we say South Asia women in energy, it's not only about South Asian women in energy, it's also about having male allies with us, and offer and have that buy-in from our male allies. And that circles me to Kavita, because I would like to hear from you about not only from your perspective as an ecosystem builder, but also from what your personal experiences have been when it comes to mentorship, because we spoke about that informally.
Thank
So,
you, Nidhi.
over to you.
Yeah. So firstly, when Nidhi and Ripu asked me, I said I can talk about clean energy till the cows come home. I can maybe even talk about financing of clean energy. But the women bridging the clean energy gap, of clean energy financing gap, has really given me thought for reflection. Again, I'm not a gender expert like Sunita mentioned, but I think I've been part of building an ecosystem in Singapore. I mean, I moved geographies. I moved from India to Singapore 30 years ago. And as a woman, I think while Singapore is very equal, women have equal opportunities. And I'm coming at it from a very urban perspective, I guess, because that's where my work has been. That we feel that Singapore is very equal in terms of education, in terms of employment opportunities. But if you, I took a little, because of this session, I looked at my membership and I asked a colleague of mine, I said, let's collate how many of our companies are led by women. And for a minute, she was very confused. She's like, why are you asking me that? Like, normally you ask me how many people are in solar, how many people are in this. It was less than 5%. And we are in Singapore, No wonders I've often been the only woman in the room when we are having some high level meetings, So definitely, I think there is a gap. And at CEAS, we do a whole range of activities, and we are, as an association, we are a catalyst. We are all about bringing people together on a common platform to debate about, projects, about business, about financing. But intentionally, I've been making sure that the women in our network get an opportunity to lead, whether it's a roundtable, whether it's a conference. So we do an annual conference where we ensure we have more and more women speakers. Last year we had a keynote address right after the minister by a woman. So that was a moment of pride for me, because in our 10 years history, that was the first time a woman got onto the keynote, right after a minister spoke. So I think it's all about building the community. And that's what's been our effort at CEAS, to really build that community for women to come together. And we also have a not so structured as what Sunita shared, which was wonderful, but we do have a informal network of women, and we call it Positive Energy is the name of our WhatsApp group. And it's all women who are in clean energy space. And we do meet maybe once a month, and it has a whole range of discussions, starting from our families to our kids, but go on to the work that we are doing. And we become like sources of support for each other, and that's important, and it's flashing. And sorry, I have not addressed the mentorship issue, but I think that I've been very fortunate to have very good mentors, being in a country, which is not a country of my birth. So I don't have my networks from my school and college. But I think I've been very fortunate to have male mentors, So it's also not just only women. We definitely need men to be part of this conversation. And there have been many points in my life where I've said, okay, I need to take a back seat. And these mentors have pushed me at the right time to keep going. And I hope to return that favor. And I'm doing that with a lot of women now, because we all have our issues. You mentioned personal issues. We all come at that stage where we are not sure, what takes precedence, So I think it's very, very important to have mentors.
Thank you. Thank you, Kavita. And coming to my last panelist, but this was not intentional, Vishal. This was not a due diligence on the balance. So I apologize about that. But Vishal comes from a thick experience of working at the end distribution, end user financing of distributed energy solutions. And therefore, from your experience at the last mile, I'd like to ask you or probe you into what do you think are some of the financial support structures that need to be in place when we are talking and discussing about bridging that financing gap. So over to you.
Great, thank you for the question. And obviously I'm honored and flattered to be representing the minority view in this case. Thank you for keeping this panel diverse and inclusive. Let me answer your question by first starting with leadership and then get down to your question on sort of end-use finance. I think it's true, and as you've already heard today, women leaders in this energy sector are now very strong advocates for the changes they want to drive. They offer a pretty clear vision of where they want to go. And increasingly, I think it's important that this transition is driven by the terms that are set by women leaders. So rather than just stand on the side and applaud, I think it's imperative for us all also to rally behind their vision and participate in a way so that they can drive the changes that we want to see. Personally, I've been in this sector for 25 years, and I must confess to you that the best jobs I've had have been the ones where women have been my boss. So for all my men friends out there, if you've not had a job that has had a women boss, I suggest you get one quickly. That might be the most important lesson. Let me switch gears to talk about energy financing at the end use. And I just draw from the examples of microfinance, community-based financing, cooperative financing. across South Asia, across East Asia. And most of the borrowers there, you see, are women, right? But I encourage you to scratch the surface a bit more and ask the question whether financing that's being available to them is fundamentally making changes in the way they're making decisions on energy use, energy consumption pattern, and the choices that they're making. And the answer, I think you'll find a little bit more mixed. First is that the loans that are being given to them are not necessarily collateral free, right? Even though they're sometimes called collateral free, they're not. They rely very, very extensively on the backing and collateral that's provided by non-farming income in many cases, which is driven by men. And in some sense, there is an implicit need, therefore, for a decision maker of other than women to be the primary driver of that loan. So that's one thing. The second thing that you see is that there's a lot of distinction we make, at least in those kind of lending, about whether it's consumptive lending, whether it's productive type of lending. You know, you lend to a small equipment that's productive, you lend to consumption, that's not so great. There are bars that we set on consumption lending. And I think those are distinctions we got to think about a bit more, because for women to really drive, you know, and manage the choices that they want to make, I think it's important those are kind of distinctions that we begin to figure out how to erode, right? And that's where it's very important for us to start looking at what are the designs in the financing. And then the third point that I want to make is this notion that in a lot of this financing, there's so much of an emphasis on non-productive assets, like it's you got to keep it well below 1%. And so those are our best financing classes, the financing assets. And one of the reasons microfinance in many parts of the world have been successful is that it's so, there's non-productive assets or non-recurring, non-recoverable loans are so low. But you got to be realistic. If you want to drive the biggest transformation and you are trying to drive it with NPAs or non-productive assets of less than 1%, you got to be kidding me. Like, I think it needs to get real and recognize that those are costs and risks that we have to bear, and we have to find a way to bear it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Vishal. I think you raised and ended on rounded up our discussion by highlighting that in the South Asian perspective specifically, asset ownership, for example, or as you mentioned, lack of collateral, that's the first barrier in itself and especially because the way end use, the last mile, so to speak, what we speak of, women have been the active agents in the South Asian context. And given that they have, given the scenario that we have, asset ownership data tells us that we have a huge glaring gender gaps, and especially in the transitioning context of even the digital divide, you name it. I mean, we have so many schemes now in India which are about, perhaps, but you need an account, you need to have digital access to kind of get those benefits. You have to integrate your Aadhaar to, so there's so many layers that, come in with advancement of technologies, but also sort of integrating all of that at that last mile is something that is one of the challenge, and therefore I think what Dr. Leena in the beginning kind of raised us to think was that we have to look at all of this. Yes, we are talking about, but what is that ambition? So I think that ambition and what I learned from listening to all of you was that while gender, we often say that gender is the cross-cutting lens that we need to have, energy is also cross-cutting, right? You talk about water access, you talk about any thing that you need to function every day. It's all about energy, right? There's one power cut one day and we are all sweltering in the heat. So from that point, I think we've learned quite a lot from all of you. So thank you. But I would like to also circle back to each of one of you with, if I have to ask you, what is that one key intervention perhaps that you would say, that one key intervention that you would say that we need to leave our audience with respect to bridging that financing gap? So over to you, Annika. And something that you would perhaps wanted to say that you could not because this was flashing. Here's your time. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, I think from the development finance institution perspective, I can say when ADB adopted its strategy 2030 and set a really ambitious goal of 75% of all projects should be gender, at least have gender theme. Immediately we achieved that goal within 2 years, and so ambitious and bold targets can really drive solutions, and yeah, leadership and guidance is essential.
Thank you. Now, I think a call for action that I have in mind is a program or a project focused on women ventures. And that particular program or project should include, among others, capacity building on how to do business planning, maybe organizational strengthening, improving administrative, accounting, bookkeeping systems, because these are the basic requirements that women entrepreneurs should be able to comply with if they intend to apply for financing. I also think that maybe a parallel project that would provide focused financing for women ventures will also be helpful. So this particular focused financing could offer maybe blended finance. It could be, partially collateralized. And in this case, that particular fund manager should partner with a surety fund manager or a guarantee provider so that the risk could be shared. So if the outputs of these joint projects or initiatives could demonstrate successful women ventures that are helped to improve efficiency, maybe scale up, then if these are showcased, that could invite more women to put up their own ventures. Thank you.
So very briefly, I would say that simplify access to financing. Like there's so many roadblocks that's very difficult to, you may have a lot of financing, but you just don't get access to it. And have faith in us. You have to start believing in us. If we can run the household, we can run anything.
Thanks for that. I think, there are three things that are required. One is if you have to do something from a business perspective, it should either reduce your cost, increase your sales, or reduce your risk. Okay. So what is it that all the ecosystem players can do to get here? Starting from your education institutions, your incubators, accelerators, investors, and understanding that gender neutral does not work. You can say that, let the capital go to the most efficient business or a capital, but that doesn't work. It leaves out many people. And, there's enough data to say that how women businesses actually are more capital efficient. So I believe even starting with basic thing, like an unconscious bias, understanding or training right across for both men and women in every institution can be a great start, just to challenge our deep set beliefs and notions. Another is the role that government can play. Can you cut down taxes for a company which does more than your work participation rate, or even employers' contribution on a provident fund? Can you pay that for a woman? Or can you pay 3 months maternity leave policy? It's easy. This is so data is available. And if government can do that, it is like putting money where the mouth is. And then, it will reduce cost and it won't be so onerous to hire women. And third thing is, can we just start asking at every level gender desegregated data? It's not much to ask for, it's so easy. That's it.
Two thoughts I would offer sort of on the two dimensions of our work that we do. One is on policy related to energy efficiency of appliances and equipment. And there, I think our key goal is how do we engage and bring the perspective of women into the policy making process. I remember, I think last year or the year before, there was one phase where we were working very closely with the Bureau of Energy and Efficiency in India on the standards and labeling program. And there must have been about 10 people working on that program. Everybody was a woman. And I think it was, I don't know if the policies came out nicer, but it certainly was, it was a great time to be there. But I think not just in that capacity, but also as stakeholders engaged in the process. I don't think we do enough to, reach out and make sure that we're engaging. That's one part. The second part we're working on in clean energy is that we're looking at a specific design of an incentive scheme called end use incentives. And there we're trying to ask the question, how can we give incentives where the incentive is triggered by a decision that a woman makes in order to get the appliance or an equipment? So in solar water pumps, what might be a decision that's directly in her control and it gets triggered by that, not necessarily by the acquisition of a product or a technology or a system. And so that is the kind of incentives that we're also trying to work and see if we can integrate that into the scaling up financing for productive end use renewable energy.
So coming from a community building kind of an organization, I have a very practical call to action. I would like to say there is no resource where you can see like a catalog of women energy leaders, or maybe a podcast where the women are discussing their journey. I'd be very happy to work with you on that, to really for more women to hear what the journey has been for others, so we can learn from each other. I would like to open the floor for some questions from our audience. If somebody wants to ask something from our panel, I know it's the end of the day, but I'm just probing you a little bit. So any questions, please? I think then I would like to call upon Farah to round up on some key takeaways.
Thank you, Nidhi. I hope I'm able to do justice to this vast discussion that happened today. Nevertheless, I'll try. So I think in my key takeaways, what I've done is I've also taken a few points from what you all have said, but also picked up some of the, so to say, key takeaways that you all have emphasized that we should take forward. I think I'll start with reflecting upon Dr. Lina's speech, where she provided a comprehensive overview of the clean energy transition ecosystem. She probed us, I think, to a lot of questions that till now, I think I'm kind of seeing, I'm trying to reflect if we've actually addressed, ma'am, some of your concerns, highlighting what works, what doesn't. She emphasized the importance of a holistic approach to integrate both macro and micro level perspectives to effectively bridge the financing gap in the clean energy. From our panels, I think what I infer from Annika's contributions is how some of the initiatives that ADB has been doing is basically developing resilient and sustainable clean energy technology, especially on the supply chain side, incorporating gender considerations, particularly in financing. She also kind of mentioned about, the women-led projects, which have integrated some gender metrics, also such as the funding criteria, also enhancing the role of women in the supply chain and the manufacturing, management. And also, I think a key takeaway that I took from your points was we need to set ambitious targets, and that can only drive big goals. I think Laurie discussed the major challenges faced by women in the clean energy, ventures in seeking financing, highlighting really the risks and the lack of collaterals that, are significant barriers. She noted the effective mechanisms such as, the blended finance model, microloans, grants tailored for women entrepreneurs, and also proved, some of the successful interventions that have been proven. She also emphasized the positive impact of mentoring and business planning workshops, which significantly enhanced women's ability to secure financing. Thank you for that. Sunita Dubey discussed the unique challenges faced, of course, by women as entrepreneurs, including limited access to formal banking. And you made it like really explicit that we need to make banking much more simplified. The lack of awareness, the infrastructure deficits. She highlighted the solutions such as the mobile banking initiative, the community microfinance, addressing issues. She also, you did emphasize on the climate leadership network, which I think brought significant highlight in how successful it has been in integrating gender perspectives into policies, noting that creating such similar networks in the regions can actually amplify the voice for women. And of course, the key takeaway is simplify access to finance, and we can do it. Ragini discussed critical gaps in the financial ecosystem. Also, I think one of the things that we've been talking even before this conference was, institutional changes. So I think where it begins, we need to start from where we are actually working. She cited successful case studies where, impact investing strategies focus on social returns and provided flexible financing terms, emphasized the need for an ecosystem change, including the gender-focused investment criteria, more so because women are, need to be in the decision-making roles, increase mentorship opportunities. And I think the key takeaways from her were the gender neutral, does not work. I think that was something that struck in my head. Increase the gender disaggregated data. So we need to make more efforts to generate that kind of information. Vishal emphasized the lack of tailored financial resources and advisory support for women entrepreneurs, emphasized that we need to have lower interest loans basis the experiences that he highlighted in this session. Also, the credit guarantees, explained the traditional perceptions of high risks could be altered through some of the success stories that he shared. Also, showcasing data that lowered default rates and policy advocacy actually play a critical role. And I think one of the key takeaways is, the reduced your cost to reduce risks also, I think is something that we need to learn from. Kavita, really interesting insights from you, because it was very urban specific, but also, it brought about a whole initiative, which was, where we've learned from the women-led startups that, you've been a part of, highlighting those right from providing seed funding, networking opportunities, being in the urban. You've cited the programs that that women are at equal par in a place like Singapore, and we need to kind of be there too. You also emphasize the critical role of mentorship. I think one of the things that really struck me is that we also probably need to find men mentors who can also bring about, that they can have the confidence in us first, and also then kind of, give us that push for us to take this forward. She reflected on her own career, noting, how a pivotal role she's played in also doing it now forward to her. And also, I think identifying the gaps where women are, where women really need support. So as you mentioned, there's like less than 5% of leaders now who are owners of companies. So I think a lot more energies need to be spent there. Also, yeah, I think that's it. That's much I could grasp in this time. But there's a lot more. I think it's more easier for us to kind of, step aside and have those one-on-one conversations, because these are endless conversations and debatable, and we will learn from each other even moving forward. Thank you so much. Last but not the least, I like to call Monali to give the vote of thanks.
I will have the last word. Yeah, no, just to thank everyone. Thank you everyone for joining us today. It's great, that you've been here listening to all these wonderful ladies and the gentlemen. I thought the conversation was great. Some low-hanging fruit, I'm not going to repeat what Farah said, but low-hanging fruit, but I think Savi can take up, such as the podcast, that some sort of communication and the numbers. Numbers really matter. So those are some of the things which we'll take forward in terms of Savi, and we'll be in touch with you for further suggestions and all. Also, my open call is, or what a call to action is, if anyone is interested to be part of Savi, even we call it South Asia, but women from Southeast Asia or men who would like to mentor or be champion of this, the agenda which we are trying to promote, please feel free to contact Ripu here and we'll share his details as well. But we will request everyone to be part of this journey, and we hope that we are able to really highlight some of these women, great women leaders in the sector as role models. So let me thank our speakers today. Dr. Leena Srivastava, thank you so much, ma'am, for your keynote address. I would like to thank Lori Navarro, Sunita Dubey, Anika Silar, Kavita Gandhi, Ragini Chaudhary, and Vishal Thapa. Thank you so much for a very informative and interesting discussion. Wish we had much more time, but sadly, we had to limit it to only few questions. I would also like to thank our partners, ACE partners, Mark and Pacharin. I'm sure I'm getting her name wrong, but yes. And at the EDB, I'll also like to acknowledge David Morgado and Felicia. Thank you so much for all the help in organizing this spotlight session. Last but not least, my my colleagues at SAREP and Savi, Farah, Nidhi for the moderation as well as coordinating everything, and of course Ripu for being the brain behind this whole initiative, and also to call out Tanya, who has been here from RTI, so as a part of this SAREP program. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and who look forward to having many of you join